Welcome to our second video lecture of the day. This one's going to be on introduction paragraphs, and for it you'll need the outline that you did for homework for your definitions essay. We're going to use that for an activity a little more than halfway through. I promise this video will be a little bit shorter than the last and hopefully a little bit less rambly, although I think we got to the main points eventually with the other one. So what I want to talk about are some key components of writing a good introduction essay, an introduction paragraph to an essay. Since you're all working on the first major essay of the semester, and obviously the first part of any essay is an introduction, this seems important. Anyway, I want to start by talking about some key components of introduction paragraphs. What do you need inside of an intro for it to be a good intro? The first thing that should come to your mind is a thesis. A thesis being your main point, main idea, main claim. In fact, if an introduction contains nothing else, it needs to contain a thesis. You may have been taught in previous English classes in high school or even in middle school that a thesis statement is a single sentence that needs to come at the very end of your introduction paragraph. But if you've been hanging out at college for more than a semester, you might have picked up on the fact that you don't actually have to write your introduction paragraphs that way. You're not bound to that rule. You can put your thesis wherever you want it to go in the introduction, and it doesn't have to be a single sentence. As long as by the time the reader gets through the introduction, it's clear what's the main point you're going to be making, that's fine. So you're free to put that thesis wherever you think it most belongs in your intro. That said, if the model of putting it at the very end of the introduction in a single sentence works for you, you're welcome to continue doing that. But I want to free you up to be a little bit more creative. Alright, what else should a good introduction contain? In addition to a thesis, you'll want to give your readers some sort of preview of what the essay as a whole will cover. An overview of your main points is nice. You don't have to cover every point that you're going to make. It's up to you how much of a preview you want to give. But you should be able to sort of pave the way for what you're going to say. There are no surprises in academic writing. We don't like it when we get halfway through an essay and suddenly there's something that we had no idea was going to be in there that pops up. Better to forecast for your readers the main things that they can expect. So some sort of preview of your main points is a nice thing to include in a solid introduction paragraph. In addition to that, consider an engaging hook of some sort. Something that's going to capture your readers' interest. Prove to them that they actually want to be reading your essay rather than just, watching cat videos on the internet or something. Not that I would ever do that instead of reading your essays, but, some people might. So what can make an engaging hook? Well, a lot of people like to start off an essay with a quote, or a question, or a startling fact, or a statement. You could tell a short story to engage the reader with some sort of anecdote. You could make up a funny word. You could, there are all sorts of odd or interesting or compelling ways that you could start an essay to grab the reader's attention somehow, and then hopefully hold on to it. In addition to that, if your essay is in response to a major particular work or idea, you'll want to make that clear to the reader as well in the introduction. For example, you guys' definition essays are all written in response to a definition that was given to you. You'll want to mention that definition, or at least part of it, in the introduction, so that your reader is aware that that's the situation that you're responding to. I would consider those the main things that you absolutely need to have in an introduction paragraph. So that's a thesis, a brief overview of the main points that will be covered, an engaging hook, and an explanation of the situation or text or argument or whatever that you're responding to. Another way to put that is some basic background information, whatever contextual key points your reader's going to need to know before they can follow your own argument. So that's pretty straightforward. And your introduction paragraph doesn't have to be long. It could be as short as 3 or 4 or 5 sentences. It could be long as a whole page. Although given that your definition essays are probably only going to be around the 3-page mark, you might not want to spend a whole page on the introduction. But it's up to you. Don't let me stifle your creativity. Now, what I'd like to have you guys do is take your outlines, and I asked for your outlines to contain a thesis. What I'd like for you to do is try and build an introduction around that existing thesis. So you already know what your main claim is. You wrote it in the outline. What I'd like you to do on that same page where the outline is write yourself out a whole introduction that contains those 4 elements that we just discussed. So go ahead and pause the video and take a few moments to do that. And then come back and rejoin me. I'll talk about conclusions. Cool. So did you write your introduction? Great. Now, obviously, you're not married to the one that you just wrote down on that piece of paper. If you want to try and do something different, if you want to change it for the rough draft, that's perfectly fine. But hopefully that's a good starting point for you while you have these ideas of what an introduction should contain fresh in your mind. What I want to talk about quickly now are conclusions. I'm not going to ask you to write a conclusion today because I'm guessing that unless you're really gung-ho about the assignment, you haven't actually written the body of your definition essay yet. And you'll need that before you can write a conclusion. But conclusions and introductions are cousins of sorts. They go hand in hand, and so I think it's good to discuss them at the same time. The reason they're cousins is because they cover almost the same information. They're like little bookends for an essay. One opens and the other closes, and you need them both. So what should a good conclusion paragraph contain? Well, I kind of already said it. Some of the same stuff as the introduction. The main thing that a conclusion absolutely has to do is restate your thesis. It needs to remind readers of the main point that you've made. To that same extent, you're welcome to recap other major points as well. The conclusion should basically just remind readers of the main points that you've made and why those points are significant. Now, if you want to make your conclusion fancier than that, you're welcome to. You can, leave your readers with something profound to think about. You can leave them with a startling fact. You can do almost any of the same things that you did in your intro, although hopefully not word for word because that'd be kind of boring for your readers to read the exact same thing twice. But anyway, those same options are open to you. My concern, though, about conclusions that get too long and too flowery is that they might break the cardinal rule of conclusions. And the rule of conclusions is they can never contain any new information. Because if they contain new information that was not previously brought up in the essay, what you've actually done is written another body paragraph. That then needs to be fully sussed out and supported, and then another conclusion needs to be written on top of that. So if you find yourself drifting into the territory of new information, stuff not covered previously in the essay, you need to back up, stop, and say, am I actually writing a conclusion, or am I writing a new body paragraph? Conclusion is really just all about saying what you've already said. And so keep that in mind in the next few days when you do get to a place where you're wrapping up the essay and you're putting a conclusion paragraph on it. Okay, that's our discussion on introductions, and then of course also briefly conclusions. The next video we'll talk about your homework assignments and online assignments for the coming week, and I'll look forward to seeing you in class in person next Thursday.